Before we begin, if you've ever felt overlooked or left out by the people who were supposed to love you most, this story is for you. Don't forget to subscribe to Family and Story like this video. If it touches something in your heart, and leave a comment below. Your story matters and you're not alone. I never expected an invitation, not anymore. After all the years of being left off guest lists, forgotten in family photos, or remembered only when someone needed a ride or a loan, you stop expecting the door to open. But I remember the first time it hurt. Really hurt. It was my brother Peter's wedding. I was 22. Just graduated college, working 2 jobs to pay off student loans and barely scraping by. I found out about the wedding from a Facebook post. Not from Peter. Not from our parents. A tagged photo from one of his groomsmen. They were all dressed in navy suits and laughing at some private joke. Champagne flutes raised mid-toast. The caption read, "Couldn't imagine this day without my people." I wasn't one of his people. What made it worse was knowing our mother helped plan it. She had attended, of course, glowing in silver. And when I asked her, trying to hide the crack in my voice, she just said, "Well, we assumed you were too busy with work to come." Busy. That was always the excuse, wasn't it? I learned early on to make myself useful. Not loud. Not needy. Just useful. I was the kid who cleaned up after Thanksgiving, who offered to stay late with Grandma when everyone else wanted to go, who helped Peter rehearse his college applications while our youngest sister Mia got a new phone for her B+ in algebra. No one threw parties for me. No one noticed when I passed my licensing exam on the first try. When I quietly bought my own car at 24, they didn't even ask to see it. I think somewhere inside I believed that being good, being dependable would earn me a seat at the table. That if I just kept being there, they'd eventually see me, but they didn't. Instead, I became the family's shadow. Expected, invisible. Not worth celebrating. When Mia got married 2 years later, I did get a call from our aunt who kindly asked if I'd be available to help watch the coats at the reception, not attend watch the coats. I said yes. I still don't know why. Maybe some small, aching part of me still wanted to be seen. But standing there in the hallway, surrounded by purses and damp jackets, hearing the music and laughter pulse through the ballroom doors, something inside me changed. Not broke, not snapped. Just shifted. I realized that no matter how many coats I held, they were never going to invite me into the warmth. So I stopped waiting. But they didn't notice. They never do until you say no. And when I finally did, they noticed I pulled back slowly, not in a dramatic way. There was no confrontation, no grand exit, just fewer phone calls, fewer offers to help. I stopped volunteering to drive our dad to his checkups. I didn't remind Mia about the insurance payment. She always forgot. I didn't text Peter on his birthday, just like he hadn't on mine. And no one said a word. Instead, the silence deepened like a quiet fog settling over everything. And for the first time, I let them forget me. But I didn't forget. I remembered every time my achievements were brushed aside. Every time I heard Mom say, "Mia's always been the special one," as if that excused everything. Every time Peter introduced me as our older sister. Kind of shy, not really into family stuff. Not into family stuff. That's how they framed it. I was the distant one, the antisocial one. The one who chose not to be part of things. It was easier than admitting the truth. I was excluded intentionally, consistently. They never saw me as one of them. Peter built a startup that failed within a year, but my parents still called him their entrepreneur. Mia switched college majors 3 times and dropped out, yet they supported her self-discovery. Meanwhile, I worked full-time, saved, built a consulting business from scratch, and no one asked me how I was doing. To them, I was just fine. Always fine. Always the one who figures it out. So when the 3rd wedding came, my cousin Danny's, I wasn't surprised. I didn't get a proper invite. I got a forwarded email. The kind you'd send to coworkers for a group lunch. No +1, no warm message. Just a PDF attachment and a hope you can make it. I didn't go. Not because I was angry. but because I finally realized I didn't owe them attendance to things I wasn't truly invited to. A month later, I heard through a mutual friend that Mia was planning a vow renewal ceremony. She and her husband had just hit their 5-year mark, and she wanted a romantic Tuscan-style evening in our parents' backyard. They were going all out. String lights, imported wine, a live violinist. They posted pictures everywhere, and in the background of one video, I heard Mia's voice. Obviously, I didn't invite Nora. She's not really family, you know? That one sentence knocked the air out of me. Not really family after everything I'd done. After all the times I stood in the shadows, quietly loving them, quietly enduring, I wasn't even considered real family. I didn't cry. I didn't text her. I didn't demand an explanation. I just turned off my phone, walked out to my balcony, and sat under the stars for a long time. And in that silence, I made a quiet promise to myself. One day they would remember who I was. Not because I fought for their attention, but because I'd stopped giving them any of mine. It happened at Grandma Celeste's memorial. She had been the only one in the family who truly saw me. When I was a little girl, she'd braid my hair while humming old jazz songs, sneaking me butterscotch candies when no one was looking. When I got my first job, she mailed me a handwritten letter with $20 and a note that said, "So proud of you, my bright star." She was the quiet glue in the family, and when she passed, it was as though no one knew how to hold things together anymore. The memorial was hosted at the Callaway Country Club, just fancy enough to keep up appearances, just distant enough from our roots to make some of us uncomfortable. I hadn't planned to go, but I found myself booking the ticket anyway. Not for them, for her. When I walked in, heads turned, not out of welcome, out of surprise. Peter's wife leaned over and whispered something in his ear. Mia gave me a look that was almost smug. My mother just blinked twice, then turned back to the hors d'oeuvres table like I was a passing draft. I didn't care. Not anymore. I wore a dark green dress, Grandma once said, brought out the light in my eyes. My hair was pinned up the way she used to do it for me. I carried no bitterness, no gifts, no expectations. Just a folded piece of paper in my purse and a stillness I had worked hard to earn. The first hour passed with cold nods and forced smiles. No one offered me a seat at their table, so I sat near the back alone. Then the microphone screeched and Peter tapped it twice. "Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to celebrate Grandma Celeste's life. We thought it would be nice for a few family members to share memories." He turned to the crowd. Mia's prepared something. Of course she had. Mia walked up with dramatic pauses and practiced sorrow, reading off a flowery eulogy like it was a performance. She talked about how Grandma taught her grace, how they used to bake together, something I knew never happened. I stayed quiet. After a few more cousins spoke, there was a lull. That was when I stood, not out of impulse. Out of knowing, I walked calmly to the front. A few gasps. A few eyebrows raised. Someone whispered, "Is she going to speak?" Yes. I was. I didn't use the mic. I didn't need to. I pulled the letter from my purse. It was worn, yellowed with age. Written in Celeste's perfect cursive, I wasn't going to speak. I began, but I think Grandma would have wanted me to share this. The room went still. This is a letter she wrote me when I was 17. I read it aloud. "Dear Nora, I know you often feel like no one sees you, but I do. You are not invisible. You are the backbone, the quiet kindness, the strength this family doesn't acknowledge nearly enough." I paused. One day they will realize what you carried for them, what you gave. And when they do, I hope they're brave enough to apologize, but even if they don't, I am proud of you. I love you, exactly as you are. I looked up. No tears, no theatrics, just silence, a real silence this time. Because truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs to be heard once I return to my seat without waiting for applause. There was none. Only the sound of chairs creaking as people shifted uncomfortably. A few averted their eyes. Others, like my great-aunt Margaret, watched me with something that looked like shame or maybe realization. Mia didn't speak again. Peter cleared his throat, muttered something about the catering schedule, and wrapped up the event with a rushed, "Thanks, everyone." The violinist played too loudly as people shuffled toward the buffet, but no one looked at me the same way anymore. I thought it would end there. I didn't need anything more. I'd said what needed to be said for Grandma for me, and that was enough. But a week later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, just an embossed envelope with my name in handwriting. I didn't recognize. Inside was a formal invitation, not to a wedding, not to another family event. It was from the executor of Grandma Celeste's estate. Apparently, she had made a private addendum to her will, something no one else knew about. She had left me her cottage, a small ivy-wrapped home near the coast. It wasn't grand, not by any measure, but it was hers. Her sanctuary. The place we used to visit every summer before the family got too busy and too important to make the drive. There was a note folded inside the legal documents. "Nora, this is the only place I ever felt peace. Now it's yours. Build something beautiful there. You deserve a life where you are not just seen, but celebrated." I didn't cry. Instead, I closed my eyes and pictured her sitting in her favorite chair on the porch, sipping tea, humming a song only she remembered I could almost smell the lavender from her garden. But the moment didn't stay soft for long. 3 days later, Peter called me. First time in over a year, I didn't pick up. Then came the text from Mia. "We need to talk about Grandma's house. Not your house. Not the one she left you. Just Grandma's house, as if the ink hadn't dried, as if my name wasn't already on the deed." Then Mom called. I let it ring, and finally a long email from Peter landed in my inbox. Pages of justification. "We always thought Grandma would leave that place to the family, to all of us. Maybe you should consider selling it and splitting the profits. It would be fair, the same word they used when I wasn't invited to weddings. When I was asked to serve food but not sit at the table, when I stood by them year after year only to be brushed aside. Now they wanted fairness. I didn't respond. I simply forwarded the email to my lawyer. Then I started packing. Not out of spite, not out of revenge, just readiness. For once in my life, I was moving into something that was mine. And nothing, not guilt, not begging, not pressure was going to make me hand it over. The drive to the cottage was quiet. Not the heavy, awkward kind of silence I'd grown up with at family dinners, but soft stretching, like the air had space to breathe. I had rented a small moving van packed with the essentials books, a kettle, an old record player I hadn't touched in years. I didn't bring much, just the things that made me feel real. When I pulled into the gravel driveway, the house looked exactly as I remembered. Peeling white shutters, a crooked wind chime still hanging by the porch, lavender bushes spilling over the walkway like they had waited just for me. I stepped out, my boots crunching on loose stone, and for a moment I just stood there. The key warm in my hand. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't proving anything. This was a different kind of moment. Inside, the air smelled like old wood and time dust filtered through sunlight slanting across the floorboards. I walked through each room, slowly touching the walls like I was greeting an old friend. In the kitchen, I found the note Grandma had left in the drawer by the sink. One line scribbled in fading blue ink. "A quiet life is not a lesser one." I whispered the words aloud. That night, I brewed a cup of tea, sat out on the porch, wrapped in a sweater, and watched the moonlight turn the garden silver. I didn't check my phone. I didn't scroll. I didn't wait for anyone to call. I was just there, with myself. And it was enough. A week passed. Then 2, and slowly word must have spread through the family that I wasn't just keeping the cottage. I was settling in. Peter showed up first, unannounced. He stood on the porch like a man who had never been refused anything in his life. Holding a bakery box like peace could be bought with sugar. "Nora," he said, "can we talk?" I nodded but didn't invite him inside. We sat on the steps. He tried small talk. Commented on the garden, asked if the plumbing worked. I let him talk. Then he finally got to it. "I know things haven't always been fair. I looked at him. He couldn't meet my eyes. We just never expected you to pull away like this. You were always the one who held the family together. That made me laugh quietly. He looked startled. What's funny? You never noticed who was holding things. You only noticed when they stopped. He went quiet. For the first time in years, I saw something shift in his face. Not guilt exactly, but discomfort. The kind that comes from finally hearing a truth you had long denied. I didn't realize you felt this way. I sipped my tea. You didn't have to realize it. Peter, you just had to notice, but you didn't. None of you did. And I spent years hoping one of you would. I gave and gave until I was empty. And when I stopped, you started calling it betrayal. He opened his mouth, closed it, then said nothing. He left not long after the bakery box untouched on the porch. I didn't feel triumph, just clarity. It's not that I wanted them to suffer. I just didn't want to be the only one suffering anymore. And I wasn't. Not anymore. It took another 2 weeks before Mia came. She didn't bother pretending it was a social visit. She arrived in a sleek black car wearing oversized sunglasses and a coat that didn't quite match the spring air. She stood at the base of the porch like she couldn't decide whether she was there to beg or to threaten. I heard Peter came by. She said, arms crossed, I suppose you heard a lot? I replied, not moving from my chair. She pulled off her sunglasses. Her eyes were tired, the kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from fear of losing something. Why are you doing this? She asked. Why now? You never wanted the spotlight? I still don't. I said, I just want peace. She scoffed. You think shutting us out gives you peace? No, I said calmly. I think you shutting me out for years is what taught me how peaceful it could be without all the noise. The pretending Mia stepped up onto the porch, now more defiant than wounded. You're blowing this out of proportion. We didn't ban you from weddings. You were just distant, hard to connect with. My voice didn't rise. Not once you told people I wasn't family. Barry, you asked me to work the coat room at your reception. You never invited me to speak or sit or be. She opened her mouth, but no defense came. I have the cottage now. I continued, I have a life, one that isn't built on waiting for scraps of affection. You really think Grandma gave it to you because you were the victim? She said, you think that letter, whatever it said, makes you some kind of saint? I looked at her for a long moment, then said simply, no, it makes me someone she saw. That stopped her. She blinked. She stepped back. And then she turned and walked down the steps without another word. No apology, no dramatic scene. Just quiet retreat. The next day, my mother called. Her message was short. Nora, we should talk. It's time to move past all this. But there was no mention of the cottage. No apology. Just a command disguised as peace. I didn't respond. Not because I was punishing her, because I had nothing left to explain. The truth had spoken. And for once, I let it stand on its own. From that point forward, the calls stopped. The emails slowed. The invitations, what few there were, never came again. And I didn't chase them, because I was no longer the girl hoping to be seated at their table. I had built my own. And it was quiet and small and full of people who saw me not for what I could do for them, but for who I had become in the silence. Spring faded into summer. The ivy bloomed thicker along the side of the cottage, curling around the windows like it had found its purpose again. I planted rosemary along the porch rail and hung a new wind chime where Grandma's had once swayed. It was a softer sound, gentler like the life I was choosing now. Sometimes I still woke up early expecting the buzz of obligation. A text from Peter asking for help, moving something. A voicemail from Mia needing a favor. A call from Mom about something urgent that somehow always meant me sacrificing my weekend. But those calls didn't come anymore. The quiet wasn't empty. It was full of stillness of healing. I started inviting people over. Not family friends. The ones I had forgotten I had when I was too busy trying to belong to a place that had never made room for me. There was Ellie, my old college roommate who brought her watercolor paints and laughter. There was Deshawn from my book club who stayed late drinking tea and talking about poetry. There was Miriam, my neighbor, who brought over freshly baked bread and stories about her late husband. They didn't ask what I could do for them. They just sat with me one evening as the sun dipped behind the trees and cast a golden wash over the yard. I sat alone on the porch with a cup of tea. The breeze played gently with the chime. Birds were quiet. The garden was still. In my lap was the last letter Grandma Celeste had ever written me. One I hadn't read in full until that night, Nora. When the world forgets you, don't forget yourself. You are not a placeholder. You are not their background. You are the beginning of your own story. Let the silence speak what they never did. I folded the letter carefully, took a deep breath, and smiled. Not the practice kind I used to wear at family events, but the kind that bubbles up from a place deeper than relief. The kind that comes when you've stopped begging to be let in and started loving where you already are. The swing on the porch creaked gently as I leaned back. My tea was still warm. The door behind me was open, but not for anyone who still saw me as an accessory to their lives. It was open for air, for light, for new stories. The wind rustled the lavender, and the last of the sun kissed the wooden railing. I didn't need them to come back, because this peace, this quiet strength, this life I had built with no audience, no approval, it was enough. And I had said no, not with anger, but with grace. And that's what made it final and freeing. The door didn't slam shut. It just quietly, gently closed.